Time. Good evening and welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Berea Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Chapman?
Here.
Mrs. Ferris?
Here.
Mr. Mack?
Here.
Mr. Postal?
Here.
Mrs. Zerke?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you. Okay, tonight we have student recognition. Only one of our students was able to be here tonight. So Dmitry Ermakov, would you mind coming up? Can you go over to the microphone? Sorry, not putting you on the spot, but that's how everybody gets to. Oh yeah, he can talk into that one. It doesn't matter. That one's fine. So Dmitry and our other student, Isabella Baglier, are National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. And this is a program of 16,000 students nationwide. And these academically talented students have an opportunity to continue in the competition for some 7,200 National Merit Scholarships worth nearly $28 million that will be offered next spring. About 95% of the semifinalists are expected to attain finalist standing, and approximately half of the finalists will win a National Merit Scholarship, earning the Merit Scholar title. So Dmitry, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you earned this because of your score on the PSAT?
Yes.
So when did you take that, last year? Or sophomore year?
October last year, something like that.
Okay. And you're a senior now?
Yes.
You know what your plans are going to be for next year yet?
Not really right now.
Any idea of what you're interested in doing after high school?
Computer engineering as a degree.
Okay. And you run too, don't you?
No, I throw.
Oh, you throw. Okay. Your sister ran.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So what's your favorite thing about school? Obviously, you're a very high achiever. You make us very proud, but what do you really love about high school?
The teachers. I had some really good teachers. So I don't have much. Like, it's kind of putting on the spot.
That's okay. That's something we definitely like to hear. So you have teachers that have inspired you to achieve.
Yes.
And I'm sure you also have a very supportive family.
Yes, yes.
Well, we appreciate you coming tonight. We're very proud of your achievement. We wish you all the best in the future, and we have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Was he telling you to put your phone away, Mom? Yeah. We're familiar with that. Okay. Public participation. We have speakers this evening. First, we have Cornelia Sullivan.
Hello.
Mr. Sullivan, I think it's your first time speaking.
Yes.
So I just want to let you know there's a timer on behind you, and it'll be a pretty loud beep when the time is up. So
Okay.
just didn't want it to scare
I'll
you.
shut up then.
No.
I'm Cornelius Sullivan. I've been a longtime resident of Middleburg Heights and Mid-Park grad. My kids went to Mid-Park, my wife. I saw the school system rankings, and this is the first time I'm coming up, and hopefully the last. But my grandkids are in this system, and I thought that the rankings were horrible. I've always supported all the levies, every one of them, and I've supported every one of you voting. When we rank 19th out of 31 districts in Cuyahoga County, 72nd out of 91 districts in 7 counties, and we have a graduation rate of 23rd out of 31 districts in Cuyahoga County, that just isn't acceptable to me. I don't find that heartening. I don't find excellence that you got on your slogan there. I think that there's a problem. And I think that the problem has got to be either at the board level, at the superintendent level, or somewhere. It's certainly in the hierarchy. I spent 35 years in the fire department. 20 of them as a captain. I understand about accountability. I also understand that once you've been in a job for a certain amount of time, maybe there's a little malaise and it just doesn't get done as well, and something's not working right in this district right now. I do really believe that the responsibility lies with the board and their hires. Part of the thing that I'll say that there's some disconnect is the extended care at Big Creek had a change. The district people went out, we brought a company in. You hired a firm that didn't have the accreditation to do the job. When the year started, they weren't accredited with the state. I wouldn't hire an attorney and a law student to do my legal work on the premise that he's going to get a law degree and pass the bar. It seems to me, I know that may be a stretch, but it's close. I heard that there was money taken out of the coffers of that program that went into the general fund. I think that program was funded pretty well along for the district to keep it going. I have a third grade granddaughter in there. All of the years past, my grandson was in there also. They asked for help with their homework, and they got it. My third grade granddaughter asked for help the other day and was told no. Totally, totally unacceptable in my eyes. I don't know who's got to fix that. I don't know who's got to go talk to them. That needs to get fixed. And I think the responsibility sits up here. I think actually every one of you are the responsible parties in that. I hope I don't come back again, but if I don't see improvement, we go the wrong way, I'll be back.
Okay, next we have Doug Schwind.
Good evening. At the last board meeting, one of the people that participated in the public comments remarked about a number of resignations from the school district. He mentioned there were 87 resignations and that 62 had actually resigned, and that he knew of two that resigned because of SEL in the school district. I did a little research, and I come to find out that there were at least 13 people that retired, and a bunch of them were substitute teachers. So I don't know where he concluded that. He also made a comment that the majority of the other 60 probably also resigned because of SEL. And I had come across a newspaper article from the Houston Chronicle. And the byline, 77% of Texas teachers are seriously considering quitting as morale plummets. This is from September 8th of 2022. I wanted to share a couple other things from the article. These teachers cited financial stress, a toxic workplace culture, a recent lack of support and respect. More than 3/4 of Texas teachers are seriously considering leaving the profession. The teaching profession has increasingly been viewed with distrust by conservatives who are complaining at every level of state government about what they see as liberal indoctrination in classrooms. The Texas legislature passed a law banning the teaching of critical race theory and restricted how political issues can be discussed in social studies classes. And the percentage of teachers who feel valued by Texans overall was just 17%, down from 44% in 2020, and just 5% feel valued by the state's elected officials. I think this is very sad. And I want to say I support all the teachers, and I hope that the community will start supporting them a little bit more, give them the tools that are needed to help the teachers get these kids to where they need to be for their state report cards and some of these other things, and tight and strong.
Okay, next we have a presentation. Our board attorney, David Riley, is going to give this presentation, and it's on a memo of understanding between the Berea City Schools, the City of Berea, and the Longbrook Homeowners Association.
I assume you want me over here?
Yes, please. That's how the people at home can hear.
I'm sorry?
That's how the people at home hear. from the
Okay,
microphone.
no problem. Thank you. By way of background, the Smith School property the district no longer has a need for that property. The Ohio Revised Code is fairly prescriptive in what boards can do. The statute that is applicable is 3313.41. And it generally provides that if you, and a couple of statutes after that as well, but if there's a charter school operating, you have to first offer it to the charter school for fair market value. Now, we don't have any charter schools operating within the boundaries of the school district, so that's inapplicable. But we also have to then come up with fair market value for a school building is fairly hard to determine. You can't just go to Realtor.com, plug in old school building, and see a listing of 27 of them and come up with some sense of what they are. They were built for a unique purpose. They're all different sizes, ranging from, this building, not that we're selling this building by any stretch, but this building would be very large. Smith's about 40,000 square feet. They're way too big for a home. So it's very hard to determine fair market value for these things. But generally, 3313.41, the major way to dispose of property is through a public auction. Now, public auctions are very good for price transparency. You show up, whoever's interested in the property submits a number, and you get a price, but that's not a very good way to make sure that the district asset gets redeveloped in a responsible manner. I've had districts that have held auctions, the property gets bought by somebody who has a vision of the future, and they don't realize what it's going to cost to do it, and it becomes a community mess. Now, so the one way around the auction provision, and it's provided for in law, is to partner with the city and sell to another political subdivision on whatever terms you agree. That's in the statute at 3313.41 subsection C. And for the people at home, I will tell you where these things are so you can double check and make sure I'm not making these things up. That provision allows us to work with the city. Now, what's a little bit more complicating with the Smith property is in 1965, when that property was originally purchased by the school district, the developer of the neighborhood had filed what's called a restrictive covenant or deed restrictions on the property, saying that the property should only be purchased for homes of about 1/3 of an acre in size. Basically, there's a whole series of deed restrictions. Well, the school district bought that property from the developer, and none of those deed restrictions were in the deed the school district received. So there was a waiver of deed filed in '65 allowing for the school district to be there. So there's at least a question if among what can be put on this property. Is the property encumbered by that deed restriction that was filed in 1965, or does our deed that we got from the developer, which has no restriction, control? So we can spend a lot of money on lawyers going to court and fighting that out, and maybe we go, trial court and go up to the Court of Appeals and a Supreme Court and, spend a lot of money. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really do anything to educate a student. So what we're proposing, and what I think we have an agreement to, is to work with the homeowners association and the city to find a developer who can come in and provide an acceptable redevelopment plan. Now, I don't know what that is. We have to figure out what makes sense given the building that's there, the property. There's an easement on the property for utility lines. There's a tennis court. There's a parking lot. Some things might be able to be reused. Someone might come in and say, hey, we want to develop single-family housing on about 1/3 of an acre, and here's our plan. We don't know what's going to happen, but the city is better equipped, City of Berea is better equipped to do that work because they have economic development staff and can generate proposals for the 3 entities to review. School district, ultimately, whatever happens comes back to this board for approval. So the school board's not delegating any authority. Today, you're agreeing to a process which is the city would draft the request for proposals, subject to our comment and the homeowners association's comments. But the city runs that process because They need to run that process as a political subdivision. They're going to generate, hopefully, some proposals for the three entities to look at. Hopefully, we'll come to a consensus as to which is the best, but it allows the school district to consider not only first dollars, somebody, hypothetically, and again, I don't want to prejudge anything, but if it was a not-for-profit entity that bought it or wanted to buy it and redevelop it, but wasn't going to pay taxes, and somebody else offers to do some kind of residential that has taxes associated, property tax associated with it, we might say if the prices were pretty close, we'd rather have the taxpayer going on and supporting the school district forever rather than the entity that wouldn't be paying property taxes. It just hypothetically as a factor as we make a decision, what's in the long-term best economic position for the school district. We did meet with the homeowners association and the city for about an hour, maybe 3 weeks or so ago. I think it was a free-spirited conversation. We were trying to educate them as to the law. They shared their concerns, and I think there's a consent. City was there as well, or had representatives there. There's a sense that we need to do something. I think everyone recognizes we are stronger when working together than if we say, we're going to tell you what we're going to do here, you'll live with it. That's not really the most effective strategy. So we've proposed a memorandum of understanding. It has not been considered by council yet. I'm told that's happening shortly, tonight maybe. What?
The Berea City Council has to have 3 readings on the MOU.
Okay. So they're working on it, but this is the first step, and I'll pause. It's essentially a process that we're agreeing to, which is to allow the city to put out a request for proposals, see what the market tells us should happen at this site. We evaluate that in collaboration with the homeowners association and the city. Hopefully we all agree, and then it comes back to this board to make a decision, and then we draft purchase agreements and all those kinds of things. So I will pause for any questions.
Are we voting on this agreement tonight?
No.
Right,
yeah,
right,
so
it's
what-
not on here.
Yeah, so what we talked about, and I put in that my update on Friday, is that, so actually Mike Draves tonight is at the Berea City Council. And so the MOU as it stands right now has been vetted through us, through Berea, through the city, and through the homeowners association. So the MOU that we have right now is really pretty much what we all agreed on. In theory, looks good. So it's being presented tonight to city council. They actually have to do 3 readings on it. And so what I had said to the city and what I just shared with homeowners association, we expect that the city approves it, the homeowners association approves it, and then we will be the last group to approve it. Or you would be, the board would be the last group to actually approve that. And the homeowners association is actually meeting on Monday night to review that with their board, and they will vote on that Monday night, is what I was told.
Can I make a point of order here? I'm not order. Okay, no problem.
Well, and I just want to make it known that I'm a resident of Longbrook, so I won't be participating in the conversation or any vote in the future.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, it's always nice to see you.
And I will report out to the board after Mike's meeting with council tonight if there's anything that we need to update you on. Okay?
Okay, next we have a presentation from our Director of Academic Affairs, Nick DeSenza, on the district report card and also the instructional audit.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight to update you on a couple important items for the district and for our department. So we're going to start with the Ohio State report card presentation. Okay, yes, you can go to the next slide. So a little background, I think there requires a little bit of going through this report card and the rating system and the process the state is using to rate school districts because it is new. This is the first time in a couple years that we have received a rating from the state, and the rating that we're receiving is different than the rating we previously received from the state with letter grades. So we've transitioned to a star system of 1 through 5. And I'll go through each of the categories, how we fared within that category, and explaining some of the background information with it. All right, so there's 5 components that are rated by the Ohio Department of Education. The first is achievement. Achievement is a measure of how well students performed on the state test, so how well they did. That's a pretty classic component to the report card. The second is progress. Progress measures the growth of all students based on past performance. The next component is gap closing. Gap closing takes a look at our subgroups of students in the district and how well they did in meeting a set criteria or a set goal within that subgroup as far as achievement or growth is concerned. And it looks at the subgroups include income, race, ethnicity, and disability. Graduation rate is the next component, and the graduation rate is a measure of both the 4-year and the 5-year graduation rate. I'll talk more about that when we get to it. And the final component is K-3 literacy, which is a measure that the state uses to gauge reading improvement and proficiency for students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then that final note there is a measure of college career, military, and workforce readiness that they plan to begin rating in 2025. So I think one of the biggest things that when I see and when we see the state report card is how we use it, right? It's a measure of what has happened. It's a measure of student performance on a given day. And the most important thing is the response that we have as a school district to the report card. So it does provide us some important information. And at the very end of the presentation, I'll talk about some of the steps that we're taking in each of the components to address some of the report card measurements. Other important factors, this slide is much longer because it is more important. There are a lot of ways that we and all school districts measure themselves in a lot of different ways other than that state test that the students take in the spring. It's not the only measure we use. The quality profile that was recently released is one really great way to highlight the offerings and the opportunities for our students, things like visiting our schools, talking to the educators and parents and students and graduates. The pride that we have here in this district are all a really great reflection of the things that we do on an everyday basis here in the district as well. All right, so now we will get into the nitty-gritty here. So this is the overview of the stars that we received from in each of the categories. So you'll see next to each of the stars, there is a description of what that achievement of those stars means. So you'll see that in our achievement with 3 stars is reflective that the district meets state standards in academic achievement. 3 stars in progress as well, again, showing that we meet the state's standards in student growth. Gap closing, 4 stars, showing that we exceed the state standards in closing educational gaps with our subgroups of students. Graduation rate, 2 stars, which indicates need for support in meeting the state standards for graduation. And finally, early literacy, 3 stars, indicating that we meet the state standards in early literacy K through 3. All right, so we're going to go through each of the components and kind of pick it apart a little bit and describe what exactly it means. Our first area is achievement. They call it achievement. It's a measure that the state of Ohio uses called the Performance Index. The Performance Index is based on the achievement level of each and every individual student. Those students, based on their level of achievement on the test, receive a number. So you could see it in the small print there. An untested student would be a 0, while a student scoring advanced plus would be worth 1.3. And so all of that for every student gets added together to indicate a score. That score is then made into a percentage based on the total maximum number of performance index points for a school district. And so this year, the maximum possible score is determined by the average of the highest 2% of district performance in the state.
Nick, can I interrupt for a
Yes,
second?
please.
You said this year, so does that mean that that changes every year?
Yes,
And we don't know ahead of time what that's going to be?
that's correct. Because it's all based on those 2%. It depends on the top 2% performing school districts in the state.
There we go. I just want to say, so that score used to be out of 100 and, well, it was 20, because the advanced plus wasn't, and nobody gets a perfect score. A perfect score is 120 points of the performance index. And so in revising the report card, one of the things like, how can you set a bar at which you know not anyone's ever going to hit that perfect mark? So that is a change, which is good. So it will, again, it's a, I don't even look at that as being a target, because your score is what your score is.
Please.
Question, going back to that. The 0 that the students were, those that don't test, that would be like an opt-out.
It could be an
Student.
opt-out, it could be a student who wasn't present, that wouldn't come in during the testing window without an excuse that we could have received from the state.
So is that count against us?
Yes,
So it's part of.
yeah. A non-tested
So
student is,
students,
yeah.
and can you tell me, just kind of give me an idea, like, what kind of number could we possibly be talking about for somebody that, that aren't taking the test, for whatever reason maybe, whether,
Yeah, our buildings work really hard to make sure every student gets tested. It's probably more common in the past couple of years, only because we have families and students with a lot more, difficult situations at home and coming to school and attendance and those types of things. But we realize that is the ultimate. That 0 is the ultimate, right? Just the kid sitting for the test and receiving a very poor score gets us a 0.3. So each building works really hard to get the students tested, but
but.
it's fairly rare.
Okay,
Yeah, there's a handful probably at each building every year.
okay. Thank
So,
you.
and to know that parents are allowed to sign an opt-out. So we have a process by which we go through, and I'm assuming all districts go through it, where we sit down with the parent and say, this is why we want your student to test, right? But at the end of the day, if they say, still don't want my student to test, we have them sign a form, and they go on about their day.
Okay, so we received a 3-star rating. Our performance index points were 81. The maximum possible score, the top 2%, averaged in at 107.3. So our performance index percentage was 75.5%, which you could see places us in the middle of the 3-star rating.
Do you know what districts were, get it.
No, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is first ring. Okay, so these are our districts that are around us. First ring districts have certain characteristics. They border the major metropolitan district of Cleveland and have a typical demographic, socioeconomics, transiency of families. So I think, this is one of the comparisons that we make in our area. They're most like us in our area. And that's how we stacked up as far as achievement is concerned, with the performance index in the far right column.
Okay, so my question actually wasn't up there.
Okay.
What were the top 2%? I'm assuming Solon was one.
Yeah, I'd have to really see who those were. I'm assuming it was, Solon was in there.
Are you talking about performance index?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so, and again, I've been on that report card committee, so that, to determine this, the performance index, it's really taken Solon's performance index over the last 3 years. They have scored the highest in the state for solid for, I don't know how many years now, so it is Solon. It could change, but right now it's Solon.
Okay, some celebrations as far as achievement. I think this was an area that we did well in, and I wanted to point out some achievements. Our performance index increased 6.5 points from 2021 and more than 7 points from 2020. I think that's an indicator of how well we are coming out of the pandemic and growing student achievement. Increased passage rates, passage percentage, not performance index, but our percentage who passed the state test that hit that benchmark for passage. In 16 out of 19 state tests, they increased. Okay, so we are moving that proficiency rate for students in 16 out of 19 of our tests, and those are listed there. In 11 out of the 19 tests, we had achievement above the state average compared to 9 out of 19 last year. And this one I think is great. These next two are really great. An increase in students scoring advanced or accomplished, the two high levels, the highest two levels. Advanced, we had 18.5%, while we had 13.2 in 2021. And at the accomplished level, 19% of students achieved the accomplished rating, where it was 17.5 last year. And finally, an overall increase of students scoring proficient or higher, as measured by the performance index since 2020. We had 62.2%, and that's a growth from the past two years, 51.8 and 53.6 the last 2 years. So that's an increase of more than 10% in the past 2 years. All right, we're going to move on to progress. So progress is a component that measures student performance based on a state calculation of expected growth for students. The measure is value added, and value added is a statistical analysis that tries to measure the impact of schools have on students and their expected growth over time. The following two items are used to measure value added. It's the growth index, which is the really complex measure of statistical certainty of student growth, and the effect size, the relationship between the growth and the impact of the building or district has on them.
I will just, anytime we talk about this and value added, and I can't tell you how many meetings I've been at, and I've sat with the people from OD and like, tell us exactly what it is, and they can't. It's
What's
really,
behind the curtain?
It's one of those, so it is, it's a behind the curtain kind of thing, but I will tell you, I'm very proud of the work that we've done to make it happen, so go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I don't think we get too caught up in the statistics of it, but we know we need to have kids grow, right? That's the easy way to look at it, and that's what we try to do every day. So overall district rating of 3 stars, which means that we met that expected growth for students. Some celebrations. We showed expected or higher growth in 20 out of 27 of the progress categories. And to celebrate a few, 5 of the most, these received the highest possible progress rating based on their calculations: 6th grade math, 8th grade math, algebra, biology, and American government. And progress likes to use colors, so you'll see here this indicates, based on the color key down at the bottom, all the way from students made less progress than expected if it's red, all the way up to students made more progress than expected with significant evidence of it. So this breaks down, you can see across all grades, we were green or yellow, and then each individual test is different. More detailed information about value added comes out in the next 2 weeks. Individual teacher level value added, as well as specific building information on value added. And that's the star, how you determine which star you receive based on your value added measure. All right, and we're on to gap closing. So gap closing is, there's a lot of facets to gap closing, which is interesting. So I'll try to explain them all in a way that makes sense. So it tells the school how well they're doing at meeting the performance expectations in language arts, math, and graduation for all subgroups of students. So listed here are the subgroups of students, and then each of those subgroups, their English language arts achievement and growth are looked at, their math growth and achievement are looked at, and then their graduation is also looked at. So it branches out into a lot of different pieces of information.
Nick, those categories are not our categories. Those are given to us by the state.
That is correct. Those are the state designated
The subgroups.
subgroups, yes.
And also, I mean, that's also if parents indicated what
Correct.
subgroup they're in when they registered their children.
Correct. All right, so the measure is based on an annual performance goal that is set for each subgroup in the following 6 areas. So it's ELA achievement, ELA growth, math achievement, math growth, graduation, English learner proficiency for our English learners, chronic absenteeism, and gifted performance. We received 4 stars, receiving 49.2% of the points in performance in gap closing, which indicates that we exceeded the state standards in closing educational gaps for our subgroups. And then some celebrations that I wanted to point out. All 9 of our subgroups exceeded their annual performance goal in achievement in ELA and math. 7 out of our 9 subgroups exceeded their annual performance goal in growth in math. Our Hispanic students and students with disability subgroups exceeded their annual performance goal for graduation. And our English learners exceeded their annual performance goal by 33%. They blew it out of the water. Okay, graduation. So graduation component is a measure of a 4-year and a 5-year graduation rate. The 4-year graduation rate makes up 60% of your score, and the 5-year is 40%. So the weird thing about graduation rate and the ratings is that we are not rated off of our 2022 graduates this past year. Our rating comes from our 2021 graduates from last year. So it does not measure this past group. So one of the things I just want to talk about is what was happening in our district at that time. So that year, that 2021 school year is the school year in which we were coming off a really difficult year with the pandemic, but we also severed ties with Ombudsman, which was a separate educational setting for our at-risk high school students, and we brought those students back to the high school. And it was a year without the Titan Learning Academy, which we brought back this past year. So we did have a year where we probably didn't have that credit recovery, real strong credit recovery option for students coming off the pandemic and with the closing or with our severing relationships with Ombudsman. So, and we've heard the stats from Titan Learning Academy already about how many kids we're getting to graduate there. And I also want to point out to pay attention to the 5-year graduation rate in our districts. I think there's really something to be said for that. Those kids who become credit deficient in high school, our five-year rate is much higher than the state average because I think we do a really good job at keeping those kids engaged, even if they can't graduate in 4 years, sticking with us and finding ways for them to graduate, even if it takes an additional year.
Nick,
Yes.
quick question. So all the data is based on 21, 22, except for the graduation rate?
Yes.
No. Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
It's the only piece.
2021, but all the other tests and gap closing, that's all based on
This past school.
students that were present in 21.
That's correct.
Yeah, and part of
All right,
the,
thank you.
part of the reason for that is because kids, even if they don't if they don't actually hit commencement and that graduation date, they still have till, I think it's September 15th. So if you, like this year's class, so it's just too late to calculate the data is what
Right, I
it is.
just wanted clarity in
Yeah.
my own mind.
That's a good question.
Thanks.
This, I will tell you, this was one of our areas that when we got this, we were most concerned with. And I literally had our EMIS coordinator pull the EMIS data. It's our state report. She does all of our state. What is the, I can't even think of what it stands for right now. You asked
Educational
me too quick.
management information
But
systems.
yeah, so through EMIS, pulled the data and literally by kid that we said did not meet graduation. Went back to the high school, shared it with the high school counselors and went back through. And that year, we had a considerable number of dropouts. And I will guarantee this board that won't look like this next year. Both the 4-year and the 5-year rate will look way better with the Titan Learning Academy that I know they have pulled in a lot of those kids, even from the class of 2021, to come back and finish their 5-year. And I know Nick's going to talk a little bit more about it, but this was shocking to us. It is not indicative of we have declined as a district. I just want the board to know that. It was a rough year for those kids, and it was rough everywhere, but our numbers were affected more by it. And I do believe what Nick was talking about as we pulled away from ombudsman and just those supports weren't there. I mean, a lot of those kids did TVLA and were not successful in TVLA. So a lot of those kids dropped out. That was a time where a lot of these kids dropped out to help work for their families. So again, it's a 1-year slide in that rate. And we went back historically. Historically, we have never looked like this. And so we looked back historically and where we were compared to the state. And I think, again, having our counselors look student by student by student and make sure, where's that kid? They wanted to go get why am I losing, what is it? Their GED, thank you. They either withdrew to go get their GED or they just dropped out completely. So I just want to say that graduation rate is not indicative of who we are as a district and what we do to make sure that to ensure that our kids are graduating. If our kids are here, that graduation rate looks different. If our kids drop out, we lose control of that. But the 4-year rate next year will look better, and the 5-year rate, I think, will even look better than that.
And kudos to the high school. I mean, we're
Yes,
talking,
kudos.
we got the rating just a bit ago, like a month ago, right?
Yeah.
The high school already had plans in place to address this all of last year, with the Titan Learning Academy and some of the graduation pathways that we are trying to find alternative ways for kids to graduate who may not be able to pass their state test. So
And
we're
they
already on.
calculated the rate for next year. We already know that rate, I think, is at least at a 92% for next year. So they can already calculate what the rate's going to be. So it was 1 year that didn't go well, and we know that, and we own that, but we also know that that's not, like I say, it's not indicative of who we are in making sure that our kids graduate.
And I just want to point out the 5-year graduation rate of, although our 4-year graduation rate fell, just above the state average for probably the first time in a long time. Our 5-year graduation rate is well above the state average, which does show, I think we do a good job of maintaining a connection with those students and encouraging them and working with them to make sure that even if it's not in 4 years, that they do receive their diploma.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
The 5-year graduation rate becoming 93.9%, is that the overall graduation rate, or of those that did not graduate in 4 years, 93.9% of those finished in 4.
The latter.
I'm sorry, in 5.
The latter.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
You got it.
And just a comment, I'm glad to hear that this is taken so seriously, that the shock, and that something's being already looked at to address it. I will say that prior to joining the board and looking through all of the district materials, I know that our graduation rate kind of settled into the low 90s. And when you equate that to the number of kids in any graduating class, and you figure out what that number is, it's very upsetting to know that there is this chunk of our population that is leaving us for whatever reasons they may. And 92 isn't even good enough. So, I mean, I know that there's a lot of, there's only so much that the district can do to keep a child and to help a child complete. But I worry for that 8% or however many percent. I'd like to see it much higher. It needs to be much higher.
And I th-
We're too good of a community to let our kids fall behind like that.
So, and I think we will, again, we could give you that data right now, but like we will next year, again, students have a right to withdraw to get a GED. That counts as a non-grad. But students have the right to do that. So again, I can't imagine a school district ever having 100%, well, I'm not going to say that because, again, zip codes will determine that. But very few school districts will ever have 100% of their students at 100% of their students graduating. That's one reason, is that they have the right to withdraw and go get a GED, but that counts against us.
Do you know when a student does go and get their GED?
They have, well, we know when they're withdrawing to go get their GED.
Okay.
They don't have, and again, that's an account, like, I don't know if that's something that they talk about at OD, but there's no accountability to actually come back and say, this kid did get their GED, which is, and again, because if they do, if that's the path that they chose, like, I don't understand why that counts against you. That is what it is. The other piece is too that, again, that people don't know, and again, we can give you that information, is we have students on IEPs who choose, or who, based on their IEP team and need extended services beyond their 13th year of school, they're allowed to stay and not take their diploma. Again, that's the law. They have the right to do that. And that's an IEP team decision. It's not just like a student could come and say, hey, I want to stay for a 5th year, right? So that's an IEP team decision. Anytime that happens, and again, the school district makes that decision as part of the IEP team, that counts against you as a graduation. That counts as a non-grad. So again, there are all those, and I think like the class of 2022, I think we had 5 of those students. So it doesn't mean, and that's why I say when people look at these things without really truly understanding what goes into a calculation, you can lose sight of things very quickly. So 5 students out of that class, of the class of 22, are still with us. And they have the right to be with us. But for our 4-year graduation rate, they count against us. And that's just the law, and that's how it's written. And we've talked about that, that if they're eligible for their diploma, then why don't you calculate that into the 4-year rate, even if they don't take their diploma? But that counts against a school district.
Thank you so much. That's
You're welcome.
so helpful in understanding that.
Okay, moving on to early literacy, which is our last component. And this is a measure of reading improvement and proficiency for students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. There are 3 measures that are combined to create a single rating. The first is proficiency in 3rd grade reading. And these are the students that score proficient, not on the 3rd grade ELA test, but on the reading portion or the reading segment of the 3rd grade ELA test. So it's a very specific part of the test. And then the second measure is the promotion to fourth grade, so percentage of students who are promoted to fourth grade from third grade. And finally, improving K-3 literacy, and that's a measure of how well schools and districts are doing in providing support for students off track in reading based on our diagnostic assessments in the building, our fall benchmark.
Where you going with this? Nick and I actually went over this today, and I said to him, we could spend a board work session just explaining this single component. That's how complicated it is. So he's just, again, he's given this overall view of it, but there's so many other little things that, again, it could be a whole presentation.
So if you have like real detailed questions, I can sit down and nerd out with you over it, but.
And I actually think that we did have a presentation from our previous academic affairs person.
From Adam or from parents?
Yeah, just the work that goes into getting these kids on track and getting
Oh,
them
yes.
promoted to fourth grade is Herculean.
Well, and we can, and if that's something that the board requests, because even from when Mrs. Frimmel presented that years ago, this rating has changed significantly. Again, how they actually calculate the rating has changed since then, so.
So here is our rating, 3 stars. So we meet the state standards in our early literacy area, the component data specifically, and I tried to do the math, and it's definitely not weighted equally, but they don't tell you what the weighting is. So, but proficiency in third grade reading was 66.6%. So 66.6% of our third graders on the reading component of the ELA test scored proficient. We promoted 100% of our third graders to fourth grade. And improving K-3 literacy, this is, it was 31.9%, but I want to explain what that means. That is the percentage of all the off-track students who in the fall benchmark, their score indicated that they were not on track, of those students, we were able to get 31.9% of those students moved on track from fall benchmark to the end of the year. And that's at each grade level and averaged out across K through 3. And this is our component percentage ended up being 69.6, which landed us in the 3-star category. So one more time, here is the overall component ratings. So this is an image that we just received today. I don't even have it printed on here, so I have to look up here. But this just breaks down statewide. I think a lot of people look at this and say, how can you only have 3 stars? Why don't we have 5 stars? Okay. Again, reminder that 3 stars means we are doing a good job, that we met the state's expectation in that performance area. The 4 and 5 stars are to indicate some areas that maybe we exceeded or went above and beyond. So you can see here the percentage of districts who received 5 stars in all of those components, all the way down to 1 star, just to give you a frame of reference across the state. All right, the most.
Nick,
Yes.
we'll send that to the board so that they have that slide.
Yeah, it's in here. It's just, I just didn't print it. I didn't have it on my paper. It should be in the.
It's not, yeah, we didn't
That's
update it
'cause
in
we
the
switched over,
presentation,
yes.
so we'll
Okay.
make sure that you have.
Will
it.
do.
That literally came from the BASA report card committee today, so.
Yeah, we'll update that presentation and share it out. So these next 2 slides, really in my mind, are the 2 most important slides. Any piece of data we receive, whether it be a report card or some other measure for our students, it's more about what you do with it and the steps you take to identify needs and address them. So I want to go through each of the component areas and just highlight a couple of ways in which we are working hard to address them. In achievement, the past couple years, we've really focused in on our teacher-based teams and the work that they do collaboratively to reflect on the impact they're having on student learning in the classroom. That's continuing with an emphasis this year. Each of our TBTs, each of our core content area TBTs, we're releasing for a day to the board office to work collaboratively to check in on the alignment of their curriculum to the state standards. We believe that's really important, making sure that we are teaching what we're supposed to be teaching every day at the depth and the rigor that we're supposed to be teaching it. Taking a look at the resources that they have and making sure that those resources align to the standards, and also looking at their depth of instruction to make sure that we are looking at those standards and addressing them at the depth that the standard is being assessed by the state. And then we also, another goal in our district is continuing to strengthen our instructional practices that move students up performance levels. So instructional strategies and practices, research-based instructional strategies has been an emphasis, I'm sure you've heard, with the district for the past couple of years. Our professional development is focused in on that, and the work that they're doing in the TBTs is also focused in on that. In the area of progress, again, our teacher-based teams serve as a vehicle for a lot of the work that we do at the building level, and they're analyzing the impact of their instructional strategies on individuals and groups of students and growing them in their learning, and continuing to expand our Universal Design for Learning initiative to support teachers in their instruction of meeting the needs of all students. I know you've heard us talk about Universal Design for Learning. We expanded our cohort this year, our second cohort of teachers. All of our new teachers are trained in Universal Design for Learning. And that really will emphasizes the planning and instruction of all students from even the borders and the edges of needs, and addressing and making sure that they're learning as well. And we're going to continue to expand on that piece as well in the future. Gap closing. Again, a lot of the work is done in our teacher-based teams and analyzing student learning and adjusting instruction with our practices to make sure that all of our subgroups are growing. Our common assessments across all grade levels is another initiative that we're working through with our teacher-based teams to analyze trends, strengths, and weaknesses to adjust our instruction at all levels. They are developing common assessments, at least 2 per semester or quarter, depending on the level, and we're going to continue to grow on that. And that is also some of the work that they're doing when we're releasing them for a day to the board office to work together. Graduation is something we have already worked really hard to address this past year, and our Titan Academy is working with our students who are credit deficient to earn their credits and graduate on time with a lot of success. And there's also continued work with the alternative pathways to graduation. One of the graduation requirements for students is to pass their high school end of course exams in order to graduate, and the state also then allows for some alternative pathways for students who are unable to pass those tests. So we're working closely with the high school to find out what options are viable and real for those kids in order to still earn their diploma if they're unable to pass their end of course exam by the state. And finally, early literacy. Today was a pretty special day. Sanson and I were involved in our revamped RTI structure in the district, response to intervention. We spent our days in 2 of our elementaries this morning with each of the grade levels of teachers, identifying those students who were off track, who didn't meet certain benchmark based on our diagnostic assessments, and developing intervention groups and plans for each of those groups of kids, doing it at every grade level from kindergarten through 4th grade in a real structured approach and research-based approach. Hopefully this will most certainly address early literacy. It will also impact progress. It'll also impact achievement throughout our gap closing, having a strong response to intervention structure within our buildings really is key to making sure that we're not leaving kids behind and growing achievement gaps. And then a focused and intentional shift on research-based reading instructions in grades K-3 through our newer reading curriculum. I think that has been a shift that has happened the past couple of years, is a return to the scientifically based strategies of reading that are going to have a huge impact, we believe are going to have a huge impact on our students. And also, there are some items in our instructional audit that we've been working on for the past couple of years that I'm going to go into in our next presentation that I think align really well to the work we're doing. Any more questions on the state report card?
If I may, just a comment about the test scores in general. I've always believed that as long as there is movement upward, that it's good. A lot of these scores show that we are trending upward. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I would just caution the public, the constituents, families of our district who say, you know, we used to be an A-rated district, and what's happened? We are not the same district that we were when we were an A, and the measures are certainly not the same. What they're looking at is so different and probably unbelievably more complicated than the A to F ratings that were given years ago. I actually would love to see an old state report card and just to see what it was that, what we were measuring and how we scored on that. But, so yeah, I say upward is the way to go. I see that that's where we're headed. There's always room for improvement. And just remember that we're very different than we were 15, 20 years ago. And we're still a great district, great teachers, great programs. But yeah, we have work to do.
Of course.
I'd like to add to that, Corey. You know, we get a lot of comments from people who were graduates from the late 90s, early 2000s, who are parents now, and speak about how good the school district was then. It's still a good school district. What's being measured in these report cards is completely different. Students that went to school at that time did not have the rigor necessary to take these tests. Most of these tests didn't even exist until there were some in the mid-90s, and they were very few. And then the state report card didn't even come around till sometime in the late 2000s, beginning of that first decade. I have 3 children, 2 that have graduated and 1 that's a junior, and all 3 of them have had different experiences with what testing they've had to do and what graduation requirements they've had to do. It's insane. It's very hard to keep track of. My 2017 graduate had to take the OGT, which for those people that had to take it was a much simpler exam than what they have to do now. My 2019 graduate had to take some end-of-course exams, but not all. And now I have a junior who has to take everything and had the 3rd grade guarantee in 3rd grade, which the older 2 didn't. So it's completely apples and oranges comparing what the district used to be compared to now. The testing, the rating system, everything. And I agree, as long as we're showing improvement, especially with how difficult the last 3 years have been, I say kudos to the staff.
Well, and thank you for the high-level overview of all of this. I know there's a lot of information. One of the most significant things that came out for me this evening was how flawed the process is. When we think about teachers who have to make decisions, working with families, making decisions about what's best for a kid on an IEP, a kid who, or a student who has the right to graduate in 5 years. And our teachers have to make decisions in the best interests of our kids. But to make a decision that you know hurts the district, specifically our graduation, that graduation component, it's unconscionable that teachers are faced with that situation. We should be allowed to do what's best for our kids and not have it count against. I find that shocking.
I want to echo what, Anna, you had just said about our teachers, and again, what Nick presented tonight. It shows growth. It shows that we're moving in the right direction. It doesn't show, I would say, if we had a report card last year, and again, in the middle of the pandemic, things did look different. But our teachers, we had this conversation at the conference that we were at this last week, and hearing about working with our Portrait of Graduate and our strategic plan. And there were districts that we talked to that basically put a halt to everything during the pandemic. And what Nick's going to show you, and I've shared with you, the instructional audit. So when we got that instructional audit from 1920, we didn't stop. We hit the gas pedal, and we've moved forward since. And I think some of the highlights that Nick shared in this presentation tonight shows you, it's evident of the hard, and there's a teacher sitting out here right now, hard work that our teachers have put in since 2021. Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But the work that our teachers the work that they're doing is commendable. This is all about them and the work that they're doing. And the one thing I'm most proud of with this report card is what we've done in gap closing. So when you talk about those identified areas, our students with disabilities, our minorities, our different minority groups, students who are
English
their income
learners,
level.
yeah.
So when you're talking about students who are on free and reduced lunch, okay? When you talk about all of that, we did a really good job with those kiddos this last year, a really good job. And we know that when you close the achievement gap, when the achievement gap closes, your performance increases. And I think this showed it this year. We still have work to do. We know it. But for this board to know, I think we share that with you, that this is our focus. Safety is first, and everything that we do with our students then to have them achieve is what's most important to us. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to do the best that we can. So I know Nick wants to share. Again, I'll reshare the instructional audit document that has the 22 recommendations and all the stuff that we have done. What you're going to see Nick share now is where in that instructional audit did we still need to fill the gaps. So this actually talks about filling the gaps with the instructional audit. So we knew when we got that audit and 22 recommendations, we had work to do. But we're doing it. We're doing the work, and I think it's evident in some of the results that we got this year.
Okay. So of the 22 recommendations, we determined that we had about 9. Well, first of all, we made significant strides in addressing all 22. This year, we reset and took a look at those 22 and took a look at which of those or parts of those did we still have some work to do. So we ended up with 9 recommendations left that we felt we could still do some work with and make some improvements on. And we broke those 9 recommendations into 5 categories. Those 5 categories were then spearheaded by a subcommittee to meet together, develop action steps and measurements to make sure that we address those recommendations. So our first group assessment addressed audit recommendations 20 through 22. They're listed there. Our second group, transitions, addressed the audit recommendation number 8. Our career connections and plans subgroup addressed the audit recommendations 13 and 14. Our PBIS subgroup addressed the recommendation number 16, and our technology subgroup addressed recommendations 11 and 18, and those are listed there. So I'm going to go into each of the work of each of those subgroups and who was a part of that. The assessment group included those individuals there, Sarah Banza, Pete Carnabucci, myself, Nick Hall, Katie Rolland, Mark Smithberger, and Tim Vallada. And so we took those recommendations under the assessment umbrella and came up with a few action steps that we are going to work towards or have begun working towards this year. The first was at least 2 common assessments per grading period that follow the BCSD assessment blueprint and are linked to the curriculum map, and then foster and allow our TBTs, our teacher-based teams, to reflect on the impact they're having on students. So that work is already done. That's part of the reason we are pulling in our TBTs, each of the core content area TBTs for a day to do some of this work and make sure that their common assessments are rigorous, aligned. Our next is the use of our Ohio Department of Education checkpoint and benchmark assessments. This is a tool that the state of Ohio has made available to school districts. They are aligned questions, previous questions from the state assessments that connect to standards, and it allows the teacher to actually build assessments using a platform provided by the state. Does a lot of background data interpretation and sharing for the teacher, and allows our TBTs to come together and share that information with one another to try to talk about what instructional strategies they're using or approaches they're using that may be working or not working to address those student needs. So those are going to be utilized and embedded into the curriculum maps for all of our content areas that have them available to them. And then I mentioned already the increased implementation of universal design for learning. We're going to continue to grow the learning and the capacity for teachers with UDL. And grading practices committee. So this is a big one. So we're going to be talking a lot about this year with a target of initiating a group of stakeholders this spring to audit our grading practices in our district with the goal of allowing our grading practices in the classroom to reflect student mastery of content. And that's a shift, right? So there's a lot of work there. There's a lot of research behind it. A lot of districts have gone the course already. So there's a lot of work for us to investigate and learn from. But it's something that whenever we talk about assessment, we always end up back talking about grading practices. And I think now it's time for us to address this, work through this, so that we can put it behind us and make sure our grading practices are equitable and fair, so that we can move forward in regards to assessment. Teachers and facilitated from my department, as well as maybe some administrators, and that group then would see if there's others who want to involve. Parents, I think one of the biggest shifts when you look at grading practices and aligning them to mastery of learning, more than students have been conditioned about traditional grading practices, parents are even more conditioned to have a certain outlook on what grades mean. I know I'm guilty of that as a parent as well. So I think having parents involved in that is also important. And kids too. Our transition group, Keish Budushwar, Lisa Sestola, Trish Kakura, Shannon Lazarus, Linda McCory, Mark Muha, and Vincenzo Ruggiero were a part of this transitions group. There's 2 slides here. Our 2 big transitions are 8th to 9th grade and 4th to 5th grade and 8th to 9th grade. The first step would be to investigate using some structures we already have in place and growing those. Investigating the use of our LINK program at the high school to help with, to even strengthen more the transition from 8th to 9th grade, maybe with some shadowing or presentations to eighth graders. Communication is another targeted area for this group, to find ways to more effectively communicate with students and parents, to understand what that transition to high school is, how high school is different than middle school. And then internally, the coordination between my middle school and high school staff members to ensure an easier, more successful transition of students in regards to information or needs of individual students. Very similarly, transition to fourth and fifth grade, I think the template is the same for the transitions. It starts, in this one, it would be the staff collaboration. Even more important at the younger grade levels is the facilitating of communication between administrators at each level, between the high school and, or I'm sorry, the middle school and the elementary school, to better understand the experiences and the needs of the students that are transitioning into fifth grade. And scheduling teacher meetings to discuss the practices, procedures, and expectations and how those vary from fourth grade to fifth grade, and starting to make that transition make a little bit more sense to kids with a little bit more practice, intentional practice on it. And our second one is, again, investigating the use of our web leaders at the middle school, those student leaders in the eighth grade, to help that transition become even smoother, and allowing them to connect even earlier with our fourth grade to fifth grade students. And finally, the communication with students and parents about the transition to middle school, what it looks like, what it feels like, how it's different than their elementary. I think there's always opportunities to do that better for families.
I'm so happy to see that transitions are included, because as a parent, I know it was very difficult, especially at a time when the buildings were being changed, the configuration of buildings, like when the ninth graders were at the junior high, and they weren't really high schoolers as ninth graders there. And then one of my sons was at Rame for fifth and sixth grade. Yours was too, Dave. And, you know, just the moving around so much, I think, was very difficult to do all of these things. So now that we're finally where we're staying and focusing on this, I think is so important and appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. Our next group, Career Connections, have some action steps here I want to highlight. Christina Capretta, Mike Draves, Karen Frimmel, Terry Grimm, Lori Hurst, and Greg Seuss were all part of that group. And really, I will go to number 3 in talking to Mike and his vision of creating one comprehensive career planning document K through 12, right? And if you go above that to the 3 small teams to address career connections, it's really cool to hear their vision, where elementary is a focus on exposure and experiences for kids to get them to start thinking about career and future readiness. Middle school, where middle school kids have no clue who they are. Let's start talking to them about who they are, what they like, what they dislike, what they care about, what they're passionate about. That would be the focus in the middle school. And in the high school, really starting to hone that, their experiences and aligning them with their interests and how those may align with possible career options for students in the future. And PBIS. The members of the PBIS group: Julie DeFrancesco, Tammy Clammer, Bonnie Kubek, Mike Pellegrino, Amanda Prock, Jill Rowe, Lori Sanson, and Tracy Schneid. A lot of work has been done this past year already with PBIS. It's a major focus in all of our buildings. And so that first one indicates that strengthening of Tier 1 and building of Tier 2 structures in every building for PBIS, professional development with transportation and food services staff around PBIS, September through October, tiered fidelity inventory, which is a assessment that is given to schools to determine their strengths and weaknesses in the area of PBIS to help guide their decision-making as they progress towards building their PBIS programs. Building representatives meeting monthly with the ESC, the Educational Service Center, for support. We have a partnership with them with the tiered fidelity inventory, with these monthly meetings and consultation and coaching with the ESC, and training, as you see in the next bullet, through the ESC. And finally, with applying through the ESC for recognitions in the spring. So each building would apply for bronze or silver status, which then involves also an assessment of the building and its structures that you have in place for PBIS to determine which level you meet. So really the applying for the recognition and working through the tiered fidelity inventory really allows the PBIS committees to have a focus and a goal and a structure for their work, which I think is really important in building a strong program there. And I think the last one, technology, and then I get to stop talking. Steve Blatnica, Amanda Slider, Vicki Turner, and Tracy, we're all part of the technology group. All students are going to be, these are some action steps. We're going to be working through completing the Public School Works digital citizenship module through our Public School Works program. Media specialists, refining our digital citizenship units. I think we have an opportunity there with our media specialists to pick up on a very important topic of digital citizenship. Our Superintendent Student Advisory Committee, I think they already completed it or developed it?
They did social media tips for Titan,
Yeah.
so they did do that work, yeah.
Family survey to determine the needs for digital citizenship presentations. I know that's something we continue to hear from parents is, trying to stay up to date on all that's out there with social media and digital citizenship. And so I think our school district can be a resource for parents in sharing that information. Middle school computer courses is an area we want to look to revise and target to also incorporate digital citizenship in. We have 5th and 6th graders all taking that course, so there's an opportunity there for us. Our T3 framework being presented to our district leadership team, administrators and tech coaches, starting there. And finally, project-based learning is another initiative that really matches with our Portrait of a Titan competencies and shifting towards those innovative teaching practices like project-based learning. That's something that we're looking to launch in the spring.
What is the T3 framework?
Vicki, do you want to speak on the
That could be a
T3
whole
framework?
nother presentation,
Vicki's
too.
a pro. She actually just presented last week at the ESC on T3 framework.
In a nutshell.
Will anybody have heard that? What you just said, will anybody here have heard that? So T3
So
is.
T3 framework
there's
is-
three different
yeah,
tiers to
yeah.
integrate technology into the teaching process.
Yes.
Heavily research-based.
Yeah, it's less of a new thing and more of a way of looking at your use of technology and making sure that you're using it in a certain and effective ways, and those are indicated by those 3 levels. Yeah. That's it.
So I would say by addressing these, and again, some of these are lofty goals, and looking at, when coming back from our conference with Ed Leader and talking about Portrait of a Titan and talking about our strategic plan, some of these things we may have to put on hold because our next step in working with Portrait of a Titan, which again, we have to fit all this stuff in, is to really to now put it all together and say, how do we lay this out? So our goal is going to be, and even when we release the updated strategic plan, we're going to kind of call it Destination 2027. Destination 2027, which is really almost a 5-year plan to really roll this out because it's work. It's going to be some work. And we want to make sure that we do it right, we do it with fidelity. But if we work on a lot of these things right now, I think we feel really good that we have at least addressed the 22 recommendations for our instructional audit, which again, just makes us better and in turn will, I mean, it improves student achievement is ultimate. And we believe that with the work that we do with laying out what we do with our Portrait of a Titan and the strategic plan, it's really transformational to teaching and learning in the school district. So Destination 2027, stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you.
Bob, Nick.
Okay, now we're on the bottom, regular business. I would like to make a motion to add an agenda item, to add a statement on the State Board of Education resolution to the agenda.
So moved?
Second. Second.
So hopefully everyone is aware, the State Board of Education currently has a resolution that was introduced at their last meeting in September, but it's not going to be voted on until October 12th. And this resolution came about basically in response to the U.S. Department of Education's Title IX amendments that they released this summer. The resolution that the State Board of Education, our State Board of Education, is proposing, it opposes recent changes to those Title IX regulations. It sides with a lawsuit filed by the Ohio Attorney General David Yost and 21 other state attorneys general opposing rules connecting federal nutrition funds to the adoption of Title IX sexual discrimination policies. This resolution requires the Ohio State Superintendent to send a letter directing all school districts in the state to oppose these Title IX changes. These are federal changes, and the State Board of Education, by passing this, is urging school districts to basically not follow the law. It's asking the General Assembly to provide stopgap funding to schools not complying with recent Title IX regulations, asking the General Assembly to pass legislation prohibiting classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in grades K-3, which I have vehemently said multiple times, it is not happening in this school district. And I highly doubt in any other school district. No one is teaching K through 3 or any other children about sexual orientation and gender identity. The resolution also requires Ohio schools to report student identities, alternative names, and pronouns to their families, regardless of possible risk for those kids. It prohibits trans youth in sports and school facilities. It rejects harmful, coercive, and burdensome gender identity policies, and it repeats harmful stereotypes and incorrect scientific assertions, including that transgender girls are predatory and that gender-affirming care is medically harmful. The author of the resolution is Brendan Shea, who homeschools his children. And one of the assertions he also shared was that there are schools in this state that have litter boxes for children who are identifying as furries, as cats, which is, of course, ridiculous. So that's the basis for their resolution. So this statement that I put together, I know other school districts in the area have done so as well, is urging our State Board of Education members to vote no on this resolution. And it's basically just reasserting our position by our previous resolutions. For example, on May 9th, we passed a resolution in opposition to any divisive concepts legislation. And then in July 14th of 2020, we passed a resolution of commitment to equity and excellence in education. And all of these reaffirm that we will not stand for any discrimination for any reason in our school. And resolutions such as this one are harmful to our students and our families, especially those that are LGBTQ. Any questions about it?
Thank you for putting this together.
Neil?
What is the actual resolution that we're,
It's not, it's just a statement
okay, and it's just,
asking
okay.
them to vote no.
So basically the last paragraph is what
Yes,
forwarded on.
yes.
Okay.
And it wasn't on the agenda because it took me a while to put all the pieces, parts together. So that's why I was presenting it live. But it will be added if passed, of course, and it'll be on the website. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Postal?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerke?
Yes.
Hey, are there any committee reports? Blair?
Polaris has started out the year well. Most classes are full, both on the high school and the adult education level. Great demand for, types of job opportunities and learning. The school is also excited to host more dinner next week. Very nice. Corporation.
Board of Education comments? Shout out? Rick, you want to go first?
Sure. A couple of things. Snow School, first of all, had invited me back over. Cal Quantrill, Cleveland Guardian, has decided to kind of get very involved in Snow School. And so they had a wonderful gathering where the students and staff were invited in, or were a part of a recreational activity. Started a foundation that I believe writes letters to, he and his wife stay in touch and write letters to children who are in foster care. And so he's decided to take it another step and get personally involved with Snows. So it was really nice to see, having been there many years in the past, and watching the interactions that went on there. Very sincere, and it's, I think, going to be a long-term commitment. Nice. And then a shout out, as a former cross-country coach, to Coach Barnes and the girls cross-country team. In the last month, they've won 2 invitationals, came in 3rd this past week at the toughest course in Ohio. It's the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Just a brutal course, and getting them prepared. And this girls team that's taking a lot of area teams by surprise. They only had like one or two seniors, and a bunch of underclassmen, and they've just steadily built, and kind of a testament not only to Coach Barnes, but one of the assistant coaches is a 2013 grad of Berea, Dan Zupan, who went on to star at Akron, and then the other assistant coach is a 2017 grad of Berea Mid-Park, Lindsay Scarton, who also went on to star. So it's really nice when our former students come back and give back to the program.
All of us, 4 of us, this past Saturday, had an opportunity to be present at the Middleburg Heights Fall Festival and handing out goodies to the kids. And there were so many kids, and a lot of familiar faces, and a lot of kids who kind of came around the corner and saw the school district logo and the colors, and their eyes lit up, and there were so many of them, and it was great. It was a beautiful night. Brook Park and Berea are both doing fall festivals as well over the next 2 weekends, and we will be there again, and I hope to see just as many, if not more, kids, and so we'll all see you then.
I noticed in BPE's newsletter that last week the counselors hosted coffee with counselors. So we assumed that was Kara McGregor and John Mancuso, the 2 counselors at BPE. The purpose was to help parents with establishing healthy routines at the beginning of the school year, and then also to let parents know about local resources to support academic and social needs. And it was just, to me, the perfect example of promoting parent engagement at BPE, so it looked like a really cool program. And I also noticed that Big Creek is hosting a treat street, and that the first 30 minutes of this Halloween program is for, it's sensory friendly, and just a great example of making a holiday program more inclusive for families. So shout out to Big Creek.
Speaking of Big Creek, I was there today. Mrs. Hanson and Miss Jones, excuse me, helped lead the K-Kids, which is a service organization for fourth graders. They had 38 students participate today. It's monthly. It's an opportunity for students to do something outside the classroom, as well as the teachers' time outside the classroom for leadership and learning. And K-Kids isn't the only program. There's other councils and elementary theater programs in middle school and high school. So I just say thanks to all the teachers and staff who are involved in those activities to allow the children to work together and learn outside the classroom, grow as people.
And I'd like to shout out to Kelly Baumgartner and Mary Draves at the high school for their co-late class. And co-late class is something unique just to us. We're very fortunate that we have co-late so close. And the students in that class, who are mostly juniors and seniors, they study the science education standards for K, 3, and 4, and then they plan themselves outdoor learning, education activities, and lesson plans for those kids, and they teach them to them. If weather is not permitting, they do it here in the gym, but they've had some days where they've actually been able to go to Co-Lake, and I know it took a lot of work to get that organized, especially because it used to be a one-semester class, and it was moved to a year class this year. So Mary and Kelly did a lot of work to prep for that, so thank you to them. Okay, and I think that's it. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching at home.
Thank you.